Hi everyone, welcome back. It's me again, your host Faraha. I'm joined on my left by British Sign Language interpreter Anna Haig. Anna is a white woman in her late 20s. She has curly blonde hair and green eyes and is sitting in front of a white wall at home. So it's now time for our business development panel, and I'm going to invite back Gill Wildman onto the stage. Over to you, Gill.
Thanks, Faraha. That's great. Hi, welcome to our panel on creating the conditions for a thriving creative business. My name's Gill Wildman and I am Business Development Advisor for the Watershed and Southwest Creative Technology Network. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a white cis woman in my 50s with blonde curly hair. I'm wearing a white top with a big fat stone on a thread and a whitish background with some things stuck on the wall. So welcome. This is an ambition of mine, is to pull together a panel of such really interesting investors and to have a conversation that looks right across the kinds of investment that is possible for creative business, and to look at making some connections. So first, I'd like you to take a moment and have a think about, when you think about a technology startup, what kind of a group of people do you think about? Do you think about sort of young, funky people working in a cool tech space, producing something that they rapidly move towards making commercial and making lots of profits for investors? I certainly know that's my version of what a technology business mostly looks like. But actually, the kinds of businesses we work with are slightly different. Then they're still young, some of them are older, they're still funky, they've still got lots of intelligence that they're bringing to the work that they're doing. But we work with companies at a very, very early stage of their ideas, often when they're taking some research that they've done and some new ideas, and they're bringing them into a new product or service or experience. And they come very early into this kind of thing. But so they're not quite the same as our normal, as our model that we often think about. They come very much at it from a needs first, and sometimes they're discovering whole new needs about what people want from a technology. They might be identifying whole new markets that haven't been explored yet. They might be deeply connected to values that they hold, and actually so do their audiences, customers and users. And they are often early into a new space for business because they're taking a technology and they're exploring it at an early stage. And so they might have a huge competitive advantage at that stage. But what we find in reality, and what I found in the work that I've been doing over the past couple of years, is that some of these businesses are often deemed too big a risk for most investors, or that they are not investor ready and they're just too early. And for some, they really are far too early. But sometimes there's other elements to that as well, in that they don't necessarily fit other kinds of models. They don't feel the need to scale really rapidly. And so some of them even want to grow quite organically over time. And that's, there's space for those kinds of business as well. So when I started working with SWCTN 2 years ago, one of the things we saw early on was a gap between the kinds of programs that we run that bring out these ideas and help people set up a proposition for a business, and the kinds of more traditional investment that people might go for, and not enough funding in that middle to help companies bridge that gap. And so although there have been amazing companies coming through Watershed and other programs such as Sensible Object or Reach Robotics or an amazing Open Bionics, they've been successful and they've been the exception. And what we'd like to do is to sort of expand that number so that we get more companies taking advantage of the potential to grow and bring amazing products into the world. So what happens is many of the companies may slow down or may not be able to take advantage of that early competition that they can bring into being. So we've been looking at some research around what might exist and what other forms of investment have come out. So we've looked at things like patient capital, we've looked at financing based on revenue or profit sharing, or schemes that involve recapitalisation or targeted investment. So, for example, the amazing Backstage Capital or Impact X for founders of colour, or for social and green investors, we have Triodos, for example, on our doorstep, or impact investors, or for good investment, to mention just a small group of the amazing sort of innovation that's going on in investment right now. And sadly, most of it's in the US, but hopefully there's going to be some more here. So some of the people that have been joining us on this journey are going to join us now. And so I'd really like to bring in our panel now, please. And here we have Rod from UK BAA, which is the trade body for angel and early stage investing. UK BAA represent a huge group of individuals who invest in very early stage companies and are obvious contenders for the kind of companies that we work with. They've also been doing some work recently with WECA, looking at creative industries and supporting them, and especially in terms of how they prepare investors for investing in creative business through their toolkit. I'd like to introduce Esme Verity from Atmos, who also works with Zebras Unite. Atmos brings financial investment programs to companies that don't normally get that kind of education, and has a brilliant way of making a level playing field for people. And she also works with Zebras Unite, who is a group promoting the notions of zebras as opposed to tech startup unicorns. So companies that have a longer term growth and actually bring more purpose into what they're doing, and are very much worth following. So as they call them, startups of a different stripe. I think it's fabulous. I'd like to also introduce Cliff Fluet from SIlkin, and who specialises in digital media, brand entertainment, technology and innovation as part of their creators, makers and innovators division. Cliff is the person that people say go to find out about what is happening in music and tech futures, and he's really well known for his generosity in that space. So welcome, Cliff. It's great to have you. And finally, but by no means least, Martin Rigby, who I've had the pleasure of working with over some years. Martin comes from is a Cambridge-based VC through ET Capital, and has written books like Show Me the Money, which was the first time I ever got to understand what equity capital was really all about, and much appreciated. We've got these fantastic people in the room. I would love to start some questions to you. But first, the first thing I'd love to hear about is what kinds of opportunities are you all looking for in the work that you do?
Shall I go? I'm happy to go first.
Please, Rob, that would be great.
I hope so. Just to kind of explain a bit more about the UK Business Angel Association, we're a trade body for angel and early stage investing. And angels are individuals who are investing their own money, much like Dragon's Den, which you may have been familiar with on the television. But they're investing their own hard-earned money directly into businesses. And as such, they tend to invest at companies at a relatively early-ish stage of their life cycle. So the sorts of things that angels want to see and invest in are businesses that have some really exciting IP of some kind. It could be technology, it could be a creative piece of IP, it could be anything really. But crucially, that IP has to have seen or shown some level of commercial traction. So as an investor, we want to see that it's in some way de-risked to an extent. We know the market out there actually wants your product or service or your idea. So some level of commercial traction we want to see to invest in. but also we want to invest in businesses that can really potentially grow and scale. From an investor's perspective, as an angel, a couple of things: only 1 or 2 in 10 out of the businesses that I invest in are actually going to succeed. The rest I'm not going to make my money on. And so I need to make a really big return, more towards, not so unicorns, zebras are great too, but I need to make a really good return to justify those losses. So every single company I invest in has to have the potential to grow really big. So less so consultancies, smaller based kind of project by project businesses, but more things that can think, I can really kind of go, not necessarily global, but really scale a large, sizable business. But timelines wise, investors will be locked in for many, many years. As an angel, I'm not expecting to get any returns for at least 7 years, more like 10 or 15 years. So we are there for the long haul, but every company we look at has to have really high, great growth potential, and some signs that there's some real good commercial traction and potential there.
Fantastic. Cliff, would you like to go next? Tell us about you and what the opportunities you look for.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Jill. Thanks to the other panelists as well. So I'm a lawyer, and I work particularly with regard to creative, tech and innovative businesses, as it were. So very much hope we're speaking to the right crowd here. One might ask, what does a lawyer have to do with this? But I act for investors, I act for companies, I act for investment funds, etc., etc. So I have a sight across the sort of the range, as it were, for companies who want to reach out for the world of investment. I would say that in relation to the creative industries, I think what we're really particularly looking forward is genuine innovation. Now, that may sound a trite phrase, but actually there are a lot of people doing the same things in the same way. There are lots of people doing the same things in the same way a little bit faster. But what I find personally fascinating, and I know that investors are looking at, you've got to understand that some of these guys are being pitched at several times a day, as it were. So when you've got someone that has taken a genuinely novel approach, an innovative approach, that really does very much stand out. I would also say that probably the area which has the most differentiation is the ability for people not very much to say what their company does or what they're planning to do, but why they're doing it. So very much that sort of purpose to their innovation, or actually more importantly, what is your narrative? This can sometimes be called the elevator pitch, but actually it's less sales and it's more art really in terms of understanding what are you trying to do and why. Because if you can't convince an investor of that, you're probably going to have less of a chance of having stakeholders in a particular industry, be that music or film or immersive entertainment world or metaverses that you want to go in, to be able to conquer that. And then I think the last thing that I would say is, personally, I really love working with founders and companies that are ready to pivot, companies that actually understand that the most successful companies on the planet have all pivoted. They've all developed, they've all grown. And that whole idea of having that flexibility and agility is a feature, not a bug. There are many founders or companies I see where they've had the same business plan for 3, 4, 5 years and they've doggedly stuck at it, wondering why it hasn't worked. So an ability to actually sort of work with advisors, work with investors, work with angels, and also sometimes taking back the bad news that you've had from an investor as to saying no, instead of just repeating the same problem over and over again, take time to understand why and take on board that opportunity and use that to grow and pivot and develop. It's all data points, I think, for investment and also innovation that can work in hand.
Great stuff. Thanks, Cliff. Martin, can I come to you next? Can you tell us a bit about ET and what you look for?
Sure, Jill. So first of all, may I say that it's a great pleasure to be here. And I think the strand of creative is a very exciting one. And I'm going to pick that up a little bit in my remarks. And I will be quite brief, don't worry. I'm an early stage venture investor based in Cambridge. What makes me different to Rod as a business angel is that he and his members are investing their own money, whereas I'm generally investing other people's money. But an awful lot of what Rod said about the attitude to what we're looking for is exactly the same. We're looking for businesses which can produce strong financial returns to compensate us for the inevitability of getting it wrong. I'm always struck by a wonderful interview I read in the MIT Technology Review, which was an interview with Mike Moritz, who is the legendary partner of Sequoia Capital. And he invested in Yahoo, and he invested in Google. He's given tens of millions of endowment around in the UK. He's an Englishman originally, Welshman, I should say, originally, educated at Oxford. And Moritz was asked by this chap who's the interviewer, who admired him greatly, and said, "How come it is that you've got this Midas touch? You can pick these winners." And he said, "I've been a venture capitalist for 20 years, and I tell you, I invested in as many failures today as I did the day I started." So it's a leveling fact that deals go wrong, and therefore we do have to pursue businesses that are capable of growing strongly and producing strong financial returns to compensate us for the losses in our portfolio. But if I could just touch on this creative strand, I think the creative component, which can range from the way you engage with people and why you engage with them, through to the processes you use for running your business, can be a hidden competitive advantage. Because if they improve the degree to which you really understand and connect with your market, with the people that form your market, then you're much more likely to be successful with your go-to-market strategy, with your engagement, your ability to optimize, the ability to create the competitive advantage you need for the long term. So I'm very excited to be here today. And I tell you, I have an advantage over the other panelists because I attended the breakfast session, and I saw some of the quality of the businesses that are being created through the Southwest Creative Technology Network. And they are really, really interesting and really, really innovative. And I'm looking forward to finding out more about them. So I think that's all I've got to say at this stage.
Thanks, Martin. That's really really great to hear. Esme, let's hear a bit more about you.
Yes, wonderful to be here. And just to describe myself, I'm in my late 20s, got brown hair, blue eyes, white skin, and there's an orange background behind me. And my pronouns are she and her. So I've sort of worked with over 150 startups for the last few years to try and work with them to find aligned capital that works for what they want out of business. So I would switch this question around and be like, what, as a founder, what kind of investment would suit you? First of all, what type of business that you have. I think, the panelists have done, a really useful and great job of being able to describe what venture capital funding might mean to you, what angel funding might mean to you, and to really dig into that and be like, what kind of business model do I have? Am I able to, and do I want to scale very fast? Am I in a market that's big enough for this kind of funding to work? Do I need that much money to start with? Mm-hmm. Do I have big profit margins, or do I have the network effect where as I grow, the cost of acquisition will lower? Do I have these things, first of all? And second of all, do you want those things? Venture capital and angel money, for the most part, it's very effective for a certain type of business, but it's always kind of celebrated as an amazing type of funding. But it doesn't suit all businesses, and people who work in venture and angels, for the most part, want founders to know that, because they want to have, they want to be able to support businesses that they can actually fund. And so a lot of it is founders educating themselves, attending panels like this, and asking those questions themselves. And hopefully we'll also then, by doing that and have founders putting more pressure on investors, we'll have a larger variety, beyond what you mentioned, Gill, which is amazing examples of, funding available, more of that fits different types of businesses.
Thanks, Esme. I mean, that was the pleasure of being able to have a look over the last 2 years at what else is out there. There's a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of diversification in that market, and combinations of things, and recombinations of different kinds of existing tools and new tools being made. It's brilliant. So my big question for you all is that many investors work with high growth companies, and yet our companies are of a slightly, some of them are high growth. Let me say that they will succeed, and they're ready to grow really fast. But most of them are not, and so they have different ambitions, and they create productive, solid businesses if given that chance. So how can we, as a group of investors and a group of people with different investment perspectives, support the kinds of businesses that we work with? I mean, we take on board, of course, there is, work we can do around investor preparedness. But what else can we as a group here talk about? Can I take the reverse? Oh, Cliff, please. You're ready to go. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, I'll get it in first, and then happily sort of, because I think it's a brilliant sort of range that you've got here. And I think it's really important for people observing the panel to understand we see it from different ends of the telescope. So it's important to take it all. It's not as if any one of us is in the truth. Personally, I think that a lot of the time there is a sense that every startup journey has to be the same. Friends and family to C to A round to B round, and that everyone has to fit in that. And if they're not fitting in that scale or in that time scale, they've somehow failed. And for me, I think that every company, every individual, it's its own organism. There are some companies that lend very well to venture. There are companies that work very well for angels. There are companies that work in relation to impact investors, or also strategic, which doesn't seem to fit onto people's radar. You may have a fantastic business that's going to completely revolutionize one element of the audio editing world. Your outcome could be partnership and then quite rapid exit to a big player in that field. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to go through all those rounds in that particular way, etc., etc. So I'd probably say the most useful thing I can say is unhook from the idea that there's one route. And secondly, if you don't characterize yourself as a fast growth or high scale or SaaS type businesses, then don't go to the investors that look for that sort of world. So the fact that Esme's there, or that you may want to work with, I have to say, I've orbited some of the companies that Martin's team have invested in. Say this in the right way, most VCs wouldn't touch companies at that stage, but Martin and his fund are very forward thinking in that way. So really find the investors that are looking to invest in your type of company, and take direction from people that put you in the right place. Please don't go to, Anderson or, sort of Index on day one, and then get very disheartened when they say that you're too early for them or you're not what they're looking for. They're just telling you they're not what they're looking for, not that you're a bad company or that you're going to fail.
I mean, would you say it's kind of like dating, that, there are types that you would feel naturally drawn to because of the kind of trajectory you'd like to?
Yeah, well, I don't want to step on the landmines of that particular analogy, but the idea that there is one person, there is one path for every single person, or it's going to happen in the same way or in the same time scale. The way I'd say it's not like dating is you're not looking for the investors to fall in love with you, right? You're not looking for a lifetime relationship. Actually, what I would say you should be looking for in that round is a data points. What's the feedback? Who are they sending me to? If Martin says it's not for me, you should go and speak to, Jane along the road or Fred along the road, whatever. Mm-hmm. Take that as a data point rather than taking it terribly personally. Mm-hmm. I think that's the way it's probably least like dating. It's not personal. It really is about data.
Right. And I think that's that thing about, taking advice that someone's given you, picking it up and moving on to seeing it as a journey of discovering the right investor feels like a much more productive thing to say to people, rather than just trying, fit your round peg into their square hole in that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Honestly, if any of Esme or Rod or Martin said, "Don't speak to me, speak to them,"
Yeah.
I would straight on the phone to them rather than dwelling on, why it wasn't for them. I'd ask them why and get that data point and then pick it up and move on. The most successful companies I've worked with take advice, take data, don't take it personally.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, Jill, can I endorse what Cliff's just said? Because I think that one of the great problems, and it's a sort of, in some ways, a British cultural inhibition, is not liking to receive the bad news. So you go see an investor, and as Cliff says, it's not personal. But the more you talk to investors, it doesn't matter how goofy the stories are, the more likely you are to learn what it is that investors are looking for. And in the end, it isn't just a question of what you want. It is a question of what the investor wants as well, because in the end, you're looking for money to grow the business, and you've got to think about whether you need to reshape the business to meet investor expectations. That comes back to the earlier point that Cliff was making, which is that great businesses are prepared to pivot, because what pivot is about doing is matching the business model and what you're doing to the expectations of the market, and you're prepared to pivot against customers, because as you engage with customers, you work out whether your solution is meeting their needs accurately or not. And secondly, you have to be prepared to pivot against investors. Who's going to fund your business or not, if you want it to grow? And so to some extent, it isn't a matter of autonomously sitting there and saying, this is what I want to be. It's a question of saying, well, these are my values. This is the sort of direction I want to go in. These are the sorts of differences I want to make. But how do I engage with other people in order to make that a success? And that's inevitably a two-way street, a two-way street with your customers, a two-way street with the people who work with you, and a two-way street with your investors. And the more you talk, the more you engage. I do like Guy Kawasaki's great saying, which is, to be an entrepreneur is to pitch, because you're pitching to customers, you're pitching to channel partners, you're pitching to investors, you're pitching to employees or talented employees or talent whom you probably can't pay as much as they deserve or as much as they would like, because you need them to push the business forward, and you've got to persuade them that the vision is worth investing their personal capital in. I mean, I think that it's this idea of continuous communication, continuous engagement. And I'm picking up on Cliff's excellent points.
That notion of a constant dialogue with these different parties sounds like a really great state to continue to be in, that you're always sensing and responding to what you're hearing. Fantastic. Rod and Esme, whoever, have you got any thoughts about what we can do for this particular group of people?
I think I've heard mention on comments about, is it square pegs and round holes, or round pegs and square holes, whichever way around. I mean, it is, angel VC funding, it's not for everyone. Esme's spot on. We don't want to be, it's more helpful for founders and those to understand what sort of financing is right for each different type of business, because you see lots of deals, you see lots of things coming towards us all the time, and the more that we can see that's more targeted to what we actually want means it's just more efficient for us as an investor. But there are some other support infrastructures out there for great businesses who you don't have to scale, you don't have to do 20% year-on-year minimum growth rate, you don't have to do that. You can grow organically, you can just build and grow a good solid business over many, many years. You can grow a business from profits and sales. You can grow your business and get started from things like startup loans. If you've got great innovation, Innovate UK can deploy and share grants to really help businesses as well. There are many channels to start and get a company going. It's whether you need external cash to really help ramp it up, drive it, and go large. And that only as a source at early stages tends to come from private investors. The banks don't tend to lend. Venture debt doesn't kick in for a very later stage. You can't, your overdraft is only really small. They won't lend to a business that isn't trading or can't justifiably prove that it can actually service a loan to grow from. So it falls into equity for those who want to grow hard and fast and match those as well, if that makes sense. So I think it's really making sure that founders are aware, as we pointed out, what is the right investor for me as a founder. One good resource is the Finance Hub. The British Business Bank has a Finance Hub. We're part of it, and you can put in your details about who you are, where you are, what you're looking for, what do you want to achieve, and it can give you a bit of an initial steer as to what types of funding could be relevant for you. And it may well be angel, maybe VC, might be something else completely different.
Fantastic. I mean, and part of that sort of revealing what that range of investment types are is the kind of work you do, Esme.
Yes, and I would 100% back what Rod is saying. Like, I would just, be like, really ask yourself, do you actually need to fundraise? There is so much information out there pushing you to like a certain route. Going down the venture capital route, because the information is accessible. It's not easy to get that funding, but it's easy to kind of work out how, But if you were to be like, do I actually need to fundraise? Because, as Rod was saying, the reality is there is limited early stage funding, from private investors. If you're small and, you're therefore more risky, there's really asking yourself, is there a possibility where you can go for revenue first and you can go for profit? I think this idea has got slightly lost, that you could actually just make some money. And it might not be directly with your product. You might, need the funding for that, but can you offer a service on the side that can get you the money that you need to be able to maybe build your own MVP to start with? And then you're in a much stronger position to decide for yourself, do you want to go down a certain route, or actually like, what, this is great. I've got money. I've got a business. I can make, $1 million a year. This is a massive business. Like, I think the world's going a bit mad, but we need to be making, unicorns, whereas like most businesses won't, and it's about seeing other models out there that are looking at different growth expectations and sizes and being like, this is a bloody great business. This is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I'm going to jump a question now, because I think we've already moved on to one of the things I was going to ask you. But something that came up this morning in the investor breakfast, and I think is a consistent question for people starting new ventures, is what kinds of evidence do they need to show you for you to be convinced by that they are they're a good opportunity? And it may well be that this is slightly different for each of you, but I'd love to hear from each of you. Maybe start with you, Martin, and working through what are the things. What does that evidence look like? We've often got a short list, but
I think again this is an area where creative and businesses which may have a broader set of priorities than simply profit maximization have an advantage, because they tend to be human-centric, and therefore the earliest possible engagement with the end user and with the market, and finding out what the end user, whether you can delight, whether you can solve the point of pain, is really important. I mean, and also let's not beat about the bush. Clearly, trying to get to scale is important. When I say scale, I don't mean unicorn scale, but get to the scale where the business can become profitable or self-sustaining. Therefore, if you can also get channel partners or distributors or people who will be working with you to make your business a success, to show that they're taking it seriously, that they are surprised, delighted by the way in which you've delivered pleasure or you've solved a point of pain, that really makes a huge difference. Having a perfectly formed piece of technology, even productized, but no market traction, no market engagement, no view about the fact that people are going to want to use it, is a sterile place to be. You've really got to get out and engage with users. So it doesn't have to be formal market research. I mean, there's nothing wrong with formal market research. It's just got to be credible evidence that there is market pull, that people are recognizing what you're doing. And as I say, I strongly feel that creatively led businesses tend to be good at this.
Fantastic. I mean, certainly in the program that we run with the businesses here, we get them to test not only the prototype itself, but the business idea, so that we can try and help them demonstrate that there's an appetite for it, not just an interest. Yeah, fantastic. What about you, Cliff? What from your position?
Well, I wouldn't take away from anything that Martin said, so let me just add to it, which is the old one in relation to team. And that's not just the management team, what advisors, I've met a number of businesses that have sought to disrupt, sort of music industry or social video or artificial intelligence, et cetera, and they haven't got sort of the sector understanding of the market they're going to disrupt. And One thing I would say is that companies that are looking to disrupt or innovate in a sector at least take the time to understand the market that they're going to disrupt. So bringing in the right advisors, bringing in the right team, bringing in the right wider team is another thing that I look for. Again, not to present me a final answer or the perfect magic wand, but an ability to demonstrate these people have got the maturity and the insight to take on board the right data, the right insight, the right advice in order to be able to say, I'm going to disrupt this world, or I'm going to innovate in that world. That's something I think is, it's not everything, but it's a lot. You know, everyone will have heard that, you know, investors invest in team rather than companies. Not entirely true, but a lot of it is true.
And great solid experience, and yeah,
or at least the curiosity to go and speak to those people with solid experience.
Fantastic. Rod and Esme, what's your perspective?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll echo Cliff's comments about the classic team thing, but I wanted to highlight the importance of a team. We do a lot of research amongst our investors every year, and something like 70% of an investment decision is based upon the quality of the team. A great team can sell a terrible product. The terrible team couldn't sell the best product in the world. And another interesting facet is we looked at the research around, from an investor's perspective, why did a company succeed and give an exit for those who did succeed? And it was 90% because of a great team. Why did the company fail? It was 90% because of a poor team. Teams are incredibly important, and it's not, definitely seeing some industry experience is really, really helpful. But actually, there's much more to it than that from an angel investor's perspective. You want to see passion, determination, drive, a real, you know, someone who really cares about what they're trying to achieve and can really, you know, fight the fight to grow and build a business. They want to see that. But they also want to see someone who can listen and learn, be humble, not just be stuck in their ways and say, this is it, I am right, and actually be able to kind of learn and evolve and adapt and pivot. We've heard that already. Pivoting is a big thing. You've got to be really strong, really tough, and have a lot of care and backing around you to be able to actually implement a pivot. So I think team is really important. So evidence-wise, you know, how do you evidence that? Well, the investor builds that up through their kind of experience with you, through chemistry, getting to know the founders. That's the biggest part of the due diligence. The only thing from an evidence perspective, like what evidence do you want to see before making an investment? Martin's covered really well around that kind of product market fit. Proof doesn't have to be actual sales. It could be many other things that prove market pull. I think that's important. But I wanted to point out something that's often not quite there. And that's a realistic understanding of the funding and resources available to a founder and how they're going to draw that down over the future. We've mentioned about, you know, Martin's been very, very switched on around saying it's a two-way street. You have to adapt your business model, in fact, and your business plan to actually be able to work amongst the resource constraints you will have. You're never going to be given £1 million war chest to go out and make a difference. You're going to be drip-fed investments at different milestones as your business grows. And I'd often like to see founders who have more of a realistic expectation around what investment's available for them, if that's what they need to grow. They need to know, I'm going to hit Series A and secure a VC investment next year. Well, in reality, you need £1 million in revenue run rate, annual revenue run rate to hit that. So are you going to achieve that? So I want to see a realistic, credible funding journey as part of their plan. As well.
Fantastic, thanks, Rod. In the last few minutes, Esme, I'd love to hear about your response to that. Sorry, it feels like we've got so long and then suddenly it goes so quickly.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief. I mean, just, you know, the fact that you've got 3 amazing investors here that have all given different, you know, reasoning and explanation about how they look at investing says everything. Like most investors are looking at different things. There's, you know, maybe like 5 or 6 things in their criteria, but they'll prioritize them in different ways. You know, there's biases involved in that and their own experiences. So as I think as Cliff was saying before, that, you know, don't take it personally. And just because someone says no, you know, unfortunately, investors are very, very busy. They get loads and loads of inbound all the time, and they can't always provide that detailed feedback that you need. So they may just go like, not enough traction. And that might just not be true. It could be a myriad of different things, or they just don't invest in your industry. And if they keep saying not enough traction, you know, you'd be amazed about what you can do with very little. And, you know, you have to be able to have that attitude to be a founder. Not everyone can be a founder. But unless you can, you know, do something with not a lot, you're going to really struggle to get investment unless you're like a serial entrepreneur and you've got that credibility behind you.
Martin, yes.
Sure. I'm going to pick up a very quick theme from I've noticed in chat. People have been asking about whether investors like us, invest in businesses which are ethical or unethical. And I just wanted, I think, really important to nail this. Yeah, absolutely. The world is changing at the moment, and ESG really matters. And it doesn't, and it matters, clearly it matters personally because we all want the world to be fairer. But it also matters economically because we rely on being able to sell businesses on, either to investors in the public markets or to bigger companies. Their investors, the institutions, are now holding them to account for ESG. I don't know whether I'm sure all of you will be aware of the fact that Legal & General, M&G, Aberdeen, Aviva, all very, very big UK fund managers have eschewed participating in the Deliveroo float precisely because they regard Deliveroo as non-compliant on ESG. So for the future, being ethical is going to be really important for all investment decisions. No doubt about that.
That's really heartwarming to hear. And thank you for taking that up. There's one last question from the chat that maybe we can just look at briefly with 1 minute to go. I can't believe it. How do you ensure you're holding yourselves and your investors accountable for the investments? I wonder if anyone would like to take that before we finish up. Is that a huge topic?
Yeah, is that holding them accountable from an ethics perspective, from an ESG perspective?
Ethics and ESG, yes, I would say both. Yeah,
so I think it can be challenging. I think it's to actually actively hold some. As an investor, you don't actually have that much control over a business. You might sit on the board, you might have observer rights, but you're a minority shareholder almost always because of EIS and SEIS. So you can't actually hold a founder accountable as much. So you can make noise about it, make it difficult if they're falling off track. Reality is, these are people. As an individual, as an investor, I'm investing in people. And if I had even the slightest sense that they were going to go off track and do something that was totally inappropriate or not right, I wouldn't have invested in the first place. And it's very rare that these things actually happen. And having to hold someone accountable for that, I think that's not something that investors tend to really need to have to come across. Thankfully.
So it's also more decision making before even
Yeah, it's the founders that actually drive the business and grow the business and make those decisions. To be honest, I also just wanted to highlight something from Martin that he said about it shifting in the right direction. Absolutely is. These are, from an angel perspective, we're individuals investing. We have a passion. We care. Impact investing's had a massive growth over lockdown. We've seen an increase in investments into life sciences, ed tech, health tech, green technologies. We're all thinking about this because we're all people as well. We care about the social response. Angel investing is seen as altruistic, not fully charitable, but actually quite altruistic to give back like that as well. So they always tie that in as well. So I think it's a really good marriage.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us this afternoon. Not only is it a pleasure to have you with us, but also such a pleasure to get this kind of conversation about investment in the same place. So really, really appreciate Esme, Verity, Rod Beer, Cliff Fluet and Martin Rigby. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
A pleasure. Now, let's take a break. Thanks, everyone.